All right, so let's get into the TypeScript versus JavaScript debate. So we're going to be going through the pros and cons of TypeScript and talking about whether it is worth to start including TypeScript in not only your personal projects, but also for larger scale projects. Is it worth it, and what does it add to the table? Now I want to just answer that right off the bat. I think TypeScript is a long-term investment. It takes some time to learn. It also takes some time to add stuff to your code to add types. But after you do both of those things, you're going to start getting some really nice rewards from it. And I think these rewards are worth it. So in this video, we're going to be going through what you get for using TypeScript and also some of the drawbacks because of your using TypeScript that you should know about. All right, so let's jump into it. Let's start with the first pro, and that is with TypeScript, you're using a compiler to check your code, so you're going to start getting some warnings and some errors that are going to be caught for you. So what do I mean by that? So take a look at this code right here. I got to show you the most basic example. Everyone talks about this when you start using TypeScript. You have a function called add, and we have a number annotation for both parameters. And so what this means is if I call add with two numbers, it's going to be a-okay, but if I start adding a different type, so for example I pass in a string as a parameter, TypeScript is going to tell me, hey, this needs to be a number, and you pass in a string and it's not a number. Now this might seem like a really simple example, but I think this pays off really nicely when you start adding more and more functions, more and more code to your code base, being able to refactor things very quickly and with confidence, and then being able to get a quick feedback loop. As soon as I type this, right, I immediately see that this is an error. I don't have to run my code, and that's a big plus. Now let's get into an example where I feel like this comes up a lot, at least in my code. So I have this function here called filename2language, and it has a file name as the first parameter. And then I come in, and later on I might want to add a second parameter. Like maybe I also want to know the folder, which is a string. And I use that somewhere in this function. And we'll give this a save. Now everywhere in my code where I call filename2language, I need to make sure and update this, and then I'm passing in the second parameter. And so TypeScript will immediately tell me in my code, like, hey, you have an error in this file now. You're calling filename2language, and you only pass in a single parameter. And so that is immensely helpful to immediately know all over your project where are the problems with the change you just made. And because while this can be, if you're being very deliberate about it and this change is affecting places in your code, it's very easy to add something into your code that you didn't realize you were using in a certain way. And then the TypeScript compiler catches it for you and saves you from a gnarly bug. This comes up a ton of times for me. And so just the fact that I don't have to think as much, I can pass this on to the computer, and the computer can catch these bugs for me, is a huge win. And so here, we can delete that. We don't need it. And then we're all good over here now, right? All right, the other thing is not only is it helpful for catching bugs, but this is probably my favorite part of using TypeScript, and that is the auto completion and the auto import that you get from using it. So TypeScript works incredibly well with VS Code. And that's the editor that I'm using right here. So watch this beautifulness. So I'm going to get rid of all my imports up here, and I'm just writing my code here, and then I can just, hit command period, and then I can import all of the things that are missing in this file, and bam, all my imports show up here. Like, this is such a nice feature to no longer have to write imports. I can also just import an individual one if you want to, but not having to type these out is absolutely amazing. So coming from JavaScript, where I would usually have to type these out, now and then VS Code was able to catch some of the imports and was able to do them for me. But the auto import feature has gotten like 100 times better when I've used TypeScript. It works a lot better, and so I'm able to just use it reliably, and it's amazing not having to type that out. Also, I can just do it like this, where I'm just typing code, and I'm like, I want the redirect function, and you can see once I hit enter here, it's not only going to auto-complete the word, but it auto-completes it and imports it above here. And so I love that. The other thing is when I start typing and I put the parentheses here, I now get completion, I can see the context is of the type any, and the target is a string. So I can see I need to pass this thing 2 parameters, and those are the 2 types and the names associated with them. So I love getting that information when using TypeScript in VS Code. The other thing is the auto-completion is really nice when you're wanting to use, for example, in React, create components or do function calls. So here I'm going to create a comment, or I guess create comment component is the one I want. So I'm going to hit enter. Again, auto imports from me. And then I'm going to pass in some variables here. And then this is where I can do control space, and I can see I need to pass in the comment property to this object. So I'm going to do that. And control space, I can see now I need to pass in some text. And now I can see I have to pass in a question ID. And I can just do a ton of coding by just hitting control space bar and letting the autocomplete handle all this for me. And so this is, you get a lot more information with TypeScript. You can do this to some effect in JavaScript, but I'm able to autocomplete so much more with TypeScript, and I love being able to just autocomplete with VS Code and not have to type all this stuff out myself, not having to like go flip to the component and remember, what did I actually do with this? The other thing is I really enjoy being able to just like right click on things and be able to see the type definitions of it. And I feel like I don't have to read documentation as much anymore. So what do I mean by that? Well, okay, let's take the order by function in Lodash. If I right click it and I can press go to definition, I can actually see the TypeScript definition for this function. And I can see that order by takes three guys here. It takes a collection and iteries and orders, and I can see the different types that I can pass in. And then I can also see this information right here. And so it's super helpful when I'm just coding along, not having to switch from my code and just being able to look at that definition and see that TypeScript definition is very handy. All right, and then the last one I was just going to show is actually, we're going to get to this when we get into the cons section. But there you go. These are the 2 things that I really love about TypeScript, is the errors that it's catching for me, and then the auto completion and auto imports that it's doing for me. And it's just work I no longer have to do. All right, so the next pro is you can actually gradually adopt TypeScript. It's now even easier to do that when they added the TypeScript preset or plugin to Babel. So you're probably all using Babel, probably somewhere in your React code, somewhere in your server code, you may be using Babel. And so it's very easy to start incorporating TypeScript in a JavaScript project now. So now you can mix your JavaScript code and start incrementally adding TypeScript. The next file you can create can now be a TypeScript file. And then to get that to work, you can just add in a Babel plugin to start transpiling that for you. And so being able to do that is very handy. You don't need to convert your entire project over to it. Then the last pro I'm going to go over is that there are more companies and more developers that are just starting to start using and adopting TypeScript. And so I remember seeing this 2018 State of JS survey in which 46% of the people that fill out the survey were using TypeScript, which is a really good amount of them. And then also I remember looking at the survey from NPM, and 42% of them wrote TypeScript. So more people are starting to adopt it. So you're going to start seeing more articles, more guides, and more companies hiring for people that know TypeScript. And so that's something where you can get a competitive advantage over other candidates if you're good at TypeScript and you know it well. So those are, I would say, the pros of TypeScript, and these 2 being the ones that I really like when using it. Now let's talk about the not so good, or the cons. So the first con I'm going to talk about is it takes more time. For example, let's go to my add function over here. I had to add the types, right, for my A and my B up here. So you're going to have to take time out of your coding to add the types for this. Now this, in my opinion, is not a huge deal, but it is a con. For example, I have to add type definitions to stuff that I'm doing to actually get the benefit. Because you don't really get the benefit of TypeScript if you're not adding the types to stuff. Now there you can also do some type inference where it can know the types of things. But yes, most of the time you're going to have to spend a little bit of upfront work to put in extra types, and then this is going to where there's going to be a payoff later. You put in the time up front to add these, and then it's going to catch errors for you later. The next one is the error messages can sometimes be cryptic, and also just kind of hard to figure out where you're getting your code wrong. So this is something where TypeScript has been improving rapidly, and I've seen the error messages get better and better. But just to show you an example of this, let's take a look at this piece of code right here. So I have the word input, and let's say I accidentally misspell it, like I kill the P there. You'll notice we're getting an error down here. This is a very big object, but we're getting an error down here, and it says property find post does not exist on type unknown. And then I have to figure out, okay, this thing's unknown. Why is the type of this unknown? And it could be like, that's kind of a weird error message to get when really you just misspelled the input here. So depending on what, because some things may be triggering an error somewhere else in the TypeScript, there's sometimes the error messages can be like, what the heck does that even mean? And you might get stuck and you're like, I don't even know how to fix this. There are some escape hatches you can do to get around these, but that's just a good thing to note. You may be running into some error messages and you're like, what do I do with this, right? The next con I would say is library support. So this is something that is getting much, much better. But basically when you use libraries in TypeScript, so here I'm using Rebase, React, Next. If they're not written in TypeScript, they may not have the types. Now, so for example, if you want to integrate a JavaScript library into your TypeScript code, that code may not have types with it, and so you might not get the benefit of knowing the types. And so that's something to be aware of. Now, very few packages don't have types anymore. I don't know if I have it in this project, .d.ts file in my code. I don't think I do. Maybe I have it right here. No, that's no modules. I don't even think I set one up for this project. But what I mean by that is, so there are people that go in and add the type definitions for JavaScript libraries. So for example, all the big libraries like React, for example, was not written in TypeScript. But you can still use it in TypeScript and know the types because someone went in and added the type definitions for you. But not all JavaScript libraries have this. But it's getting to the point now where almost 99% of them do. Now I will say, depending on where you're developing, you can get more or less support. For example, when I'm using React Native, I'm not getting a lot of TypeScript definitions. A lot of JavaScript libraries, you're on your own. So yep, that's just one thing to note. It's not a huge deal. It's just some libraries you're going to have to not know the types of them. The last one is, that's not really a con specific to TypeScript. It's more of just, it's going to take some time to get used to TypeScript and learn it. So you can't really just take a JavaScript team and be like, hey guys, we're now coding in TypeScript. It's going to take some time to migrate and for the developers to learn TypeScript and to learn all the intricacies and the areas you're going to run into with TypeScript. So just know it's going to take some time to just get up to speed with TypeScript. But I definitely believe it's something that is worth taking the time to learn. And it's one of those things where, and we also see that in this survey, I would say like 99% of the developers I talk to, if they've spent some time to actually go through and learn TypeScript, that they've been really glad that they did, and they don't want to go back to JavaScript once they've learned it and once they've actually spent some time using it. And that's seen in this survey as well. Only 5% of the total TypeScript users here said they've used it and they would not use it again. So yeah, I would say I'm very happy that I spent the time to learn TypeScript, and I'm at a point now where even for small projects, I'm wanting to add TypeScript because these benefits are just so helpful. And I love those so much that if I'm picking a new project, small or big, I'm choosing TypeScript, and it's one of those things where it scales really well as the project grows. So even if the project starts small, as it grows and gets bigger and bigger and bigger, I'm going to be even happier that I chose TypeScript because I'm going to be able to get just a lot better. I'm able to handle a large code base better. Refactoring is going to be not a nightmare with TypeScript, and so consider these things when you're choosing between TypeScript and JavaScript. And as you can see, I am a big fan of going with TypeScript.